Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. I think we've just got a few more people joining us and we will kick off. Lovely. Okay. So, welcome. Thank you for joining. My name is Jacquie Vasquez and I'm the Director of Policy and Engagement here at Magic Breakfast. And I have the honour of chairing this Magic Morning webinar. Our Magic Mornings are a series of quarterly webinars that we host to provide supporters with a more in-depth look at the work that we do at Magic Breakfast. Firstly, a few notes. You'll be able to, if you wish, enable live captions for real life subtitles by selecting more actions and then language and speech and then show live captions. So you can have a look at doing that if that's useful. This event will also be recorded. It'll be uploaded to YouTube after the event and shared on a follow-up email too, so you can listen to everything back. And we'll also be sharing the report that we've launched as well, and that's also on our website. So there is no need to jot everything down that you're hearing. You will be getting that afterwards. Please, if you could submit your questions via the Q&A section, we will then be looking at them, submitting them to our different speakers as we go. And that's it for the notices. So let's begin. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the root causes of child morning hunger, and we've got a brilliant combination of speakers this morning with us. And we're really delighted to have all of our speakers here on the call today. Many of you that have joined us today will already know that the magic of breakfast is not just the food. It's the sense of belonging and community. It's the opportunity to develop social skills and play, the chance to connect before academic learning begins. It's the combination of that nurture and nature that creates an environment where children are really able to thrive and not just survive. But children and young people will not have the chance to thrive if they are hungry. So at Magic Breakfast, we recognise that there's multiple factors that can result in a child arriving at school hungry in the morning. And we were determined to go beyond the school gates and really understand the causes of these, the root causes of these. The work we've done has been to map the drivers of child morning hunger, and we've shaped this through looking at it through a systems lens. We know that maximising our impact depends on understanding the interconnected system that we sit within and identifying the players that occupy the same system with us and alongside us. It's vital that we work together across the system, connecting and involving together as well to truly enable and empower children and young people to thrive. Our first speaker is Ben Dunn, the Head of Impact and Innovation at Magic Breakfast, who's led our latest research into the root causes of child morning hunger and will share key insights from the findings. Now, Ben will need to leave us at 10, so do pop any questions for him into the Q&A and we'll come to him after he speaks so that he can answer those and before we then go on to the other brilliant speakers. We'll also do a main Q&A at the end of all the speakers and if there's any further questions on the report or the things that Ben has spoken about, then I can answer them at the end as well, or we can ask Ben to get back to you. So now I'll hand over to you, Ben, to go through what you want to let us know about the root causes.
Thanks, Jackie. Morning, everyone. It's a lovely sunny day here in Yorkshire, so hopefully it's sunny where you are as well. Thank you. Hopefully you can see those slides on the screen now. Today, as Jackie said, I just wanted to spend a few minutes giving you a quick overview of the report that we published earlier this month called The Root Causes of Child Morning Hunger. And we've collated a lot of evidence that exists from across the sector to help us better understand those key drivers of child morning hunger, those reasons that mean children and young people across the UK are turning up to school hungry. So a lot of this is evidence that's drawn from across the sector, from external data, from government data sets and so on. So much work from other organisations has also allowed us to do this, and for that we are very, very grateful. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to start a little bit with the why. why is it important for us to better understand these root causes? And I think this iceberg model helps to explain. So some of you may have seen this before, but we can see right at the top there, above the surface, so to speak, are the observable events. And these are sometimes referred to as the symptoms. So in our case, the symptom is the hunger. It's the thing that we see every morning. But we need to look beneath that surface to really help us understand why we see this symptom in the first place. And perhaps we can look at the trends and patterns, as it says there. For example, we could look at data on food insecurity, and that might help us to track the prevalence of hunger over time. And we can assess those trends to understand whether this is going up or down, it's staying the same, and so on. But it's still not really telling us why. So we need to delve even deeper. And we look at those structures and mental models that are more rigid and more deeply embedded in our society. And that's what we did with the root causes research, try and unpick some of these things and put a framework around it. And as you can see in the bottom left of this slide, what we found was a web of interconnected issues. And we saw how national policies and infrastructure kind of impacted on the community infrastructure and the household challenges, and how all of these things intersect and result in child morning hunger. And so trying to unpick that complexity, I think, was probably the most difficult part of this research. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a really wordy slide. And this is my attempt of fitting the content of an entire report onto one slide. So I'm not expecting you to read it all, but you will have access to this afterwards. Yeah, it's a lot to take in. So I'll try and kind of walk us through it. What you see here is the framework that we use to present the root causes. So starting left to right, you can see those big systemic challenges around poverty and housing and social security. And then we move into the middle, and we've got the challenges that exist at more of a local level, perhaps logistical challenges, cultural barriers, school funding, and so on. And then on the right-hand side, we've got those individual or household challenges, such as family welfare, health, well-being, additional needs of children, young people, and more. And beneath each of those blue boxes, I've highlighted some of the key evidence points, but the report itself contains a whole host of evidence within it. So, for example, on the left, we can see data from recent government publications showing that 72% of children and young people living in poverty are in working families. Or we can see how families of children with special educational needs and disabilities are facing a double disadvantage as parents are perhaps leaving employment to support their child's needs or changing their working hours. This helps us to understand the really big picture stuff. And then likewise in the middle, we've got some more of those localized challenges. So for example, you can see that bottom one there, bottom bullet point, families in Scotland speaking about how transport is a barrier to children accessing activities before or after school. So it might be too expensive, might be unreliable, might be poor timetabling or scheduling. And you can see how this is something that might not be relevant across the entire country, but it is relevant in certain areas. And on the right, we can see, for example, how children, young people say that they lack time to eat breakfast, or we can see the prevalence of mental health challenges in young people from NHS data. Or perhaps children, young people are worried about their body image, and this can lead to morning hunger. So you can see, again, this isn't for every single person, but these are the kind of more localized household and individual challenges that we see. On to the next slide, please. Okay, so as you can see, it's a really kind of huge web of challenges that causes child morning hunger. And trying to kind of do that justice within a few minutes is not really possible. So I'd highly recommend you go away and have a look at the report. But also I wanted to spend a few minutes just thinking about what next. So taking a quick snapshot here from Magic Breakfast's Nourishing Futures strategy that we launched about 6 months ago. And that's our forward look to 2040. So when we launched it, it was a 15-year strategy, but about 14 and a half years left to go. And as you can see here in that green box on the left-hand side, there's a bit about our evolving role. And one of those points is our evolving role from provider to provider plus catalyst. So as Magic Breakfast, we remain committed to providing the breakfast and supporting schools and really tackling those symptoms. However, we're also really keen to help address those root causes, to break the link between that cause and the symptom. So, for example, I mentioned a moment ago about those transport challenges in Scotland. And if that's a root cause, then we need to ask ourselves, well, is it Magic Breakfast's role to campaign for better transport links? And I would say probably not. But I think it is our role to help adapt and shape breakfast provision based on our understanding of those challenges. It's also our role, perhaps, to then partner and mobilize with sector partners. There's already really great people who are doing work around improving local and home to school transport. So how do we work alongside them? Are we perhaps sharing evidence or highlighting our joint challenges or doing joint campaign activity to ensure that actually these things aren't seen as separate issues and we recognize the overlap there and what that means for children, young people and families? And then the last thing that I just wanted to mention is that bottom point about Magic Breakfast moving from being designed by adults to being child-led. So whilst we have an idea of the root causes of child morning hunger, and as I say, we've drawn across a whole sector's worth of evidence, what we want to do is make sure that we're centering those voices of lived experience to help us understand the impact of those challenges, but also then ensuring that those children, young people, and those individuals with lived experience have the opportunity to help shape the solutions. And that's something that you'll see more at as Magic Breakfast implements our Nourishing Futures strategy. We want to make sure that what we're advocating for is led by the voices of children, young people, and led by those people who are affected by the root causes and those challenges. So just really quickly, in the last minute or so, I just wanted to summarize the kind of things that I've covered and 3 takeaway points for you. Number 1 is that child morning hunger is a really complex web of interconnected issues. It's not a simple thing. It's not one thing that's causing it, and hopefully you'll see that from some of our other speakers. Point number 2, we need to understand how those large systemic challenges affect at a local level, so within schools and local communities, and then understand that how in turn those have an impact on families and children, young people every day. And then the final thing is Magic Breakfast's role in this. So both as a provider to address the symptoms of child morning hunger and as a catalyst for change. And I just wanted to leave you with that quote on the right-hand side from somebody much, much wiser than I will ever be. And it's from a lady called Wangari Maathai, who's the first African female to win the Nobel Peace Prize. She's also the first female professor in Kenya and founder of a fantastic movement called the Green Belt Movement. And she says, we often preoccupy ourselves with symptoms, whereas if we went to the root cause of the problems, we'd be able to overcome the problems once and for all. I think that's just about my 10 minutes. Thanks, Jackie. I'll hand back over to you.
Lovely, thank you. Well, we are going to come to any questions now. I saw that there was a hand, or there has been a hand. Actually, if you can pop the question into the Q&A, that would be ideal, if that's possible. And just to come to the questions that have been on the Q&A. So there was one from Jenna around the barriers that exist in Wales. So primary school breakfast in Wales is free. There is legislation around that, but there are barriers that still exist. Can you tell us a little bit about them and what we can, what we and the governments in England and Scotland can learn from that?
Yep, absolutely. I can do my best. So one of the things that that came up in the report was about the kind of difference between the policy that has been implemented in Wales, as you say, it's already been implemented, and the policies that are kind of rolling out across England and Scotland. And I think what we've learned from that is how policy implementation doesn't necessarily lead to successful uptake and access for children, young people. So lots of the challenges that are highlighted from families in Wales about not being able to access the breakfast provision, or perhaps even that their school isn't running the breakfast provision, seem to stem from the fact that the way the policy is set up the schools are having to request money from either the local authority or from central government, and that's causing the challenges at more of that kind of middle level, where the schools actually don't feel like they have the funding, or they don't feel like they have the support, or they don't feel like they have the space to be able to implement breakfast provision, which limits children, young people from accessing that. So whilst at a policy level, it seems like there's a successful outcome in that universal breakfast provision is rolled out across Wales. Actually, in implementation, we can see those challenges existing at a school level that then have the knock-on effects of families and children, young people. So learning from that, and there's already been an evaluation of the primary school breakfast programme in Wales. And there's lots of kind of policy learnings that come from that report as well that we can then apply to England and Scotland policy.
Fantastic. We've got time for one more question, which is in there from Saoirse around, were there any root causes or systemic challenges that challenged our previous beliefs?
Thanks, Saoirse. Yeah, funnily enough, I was thinking earlier about what questions would I ask myself if I was in the audience, and that was one of the things that I thought I would ask myself. And I was thinking through, I don't think there's anything that we found surprising. I think the thing that I found surprising was the number and the number and the scale of the challenges. And so when I think through some of those challenges, if I think through things like temporary accommodation, or I think through, as we said, local transport issues and so on, it kind of makes sense that these things would impact on child morning hunger. So none of them were really surprising, or none of them really challenged our existing beliefs. But I think the scale of those challenges and the scale of how many there are and how they're interconnected with each other was the thing that was really surprising. And so trying to kind of make sense of that, as I said at the start, was the most challenging thing. And putting a framework around it has helped us to make sense of it. But ultimately, it's still this humongous web of interconnected challenges. And really working through those things is the thing that's going to be important for the next steps.
Great, thanks, Ben. That was beautifully concise, in which case I am going to give you a quick further minute on one more question that did come in, which was around the extent of Magic Breakfast's role to support systems that would enable and empower families and young people to have breakfast at home. So this was a kind of comment that came under Jenna's question. So our role to support systems that would enable and empower families and young people to have breakfast at home?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think from a Magic Breakfast point of view, there's a couple of ways that I could kind of answer that. And I think one is the importance of breakfast versus not having breakfast. And so I think the importance of ensuring that children, young people can have a healthy breakfast every morning, regardless of whether that's at home or at school, is something that we're really keen on. And I know our community engagement team are already out across the country working with schools, working with parents, working with children, talking about the importance of having something to eat, the importance of having a healthy breakfast every morning, regardless of whether that is at home or in school. So that will be my first point, that for us, it's important to have a healthy breakfast. I think the second point that I'd make is recognizing the kind of value add, so to speak, or the additional benefits that might come from having breakfast at school. And so that could be around the connection and the well-being of children, young people. It could be around having a safe space or a softer start to the morning. It could be around a sense of belonging and connection within school and feeling like this is a place where I belong, which helps to have those knock-on effects throughout the rest of the school day. So it's more than just the food, it's more than the kind of nutritional element of the breakfast. So I think, yeah, I'd answer that in two ways. One is have breakfast. That's better than not having breakfast at all. And if the best place to have that breakfast is at home, then brilliant. Ensure that you have that breakfast. The second point is for us to understand the additional value of having breakfast within more of a kind of community setting, such as a school breakfast club.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Thanks so much. We are on time to move to our next speaker. So our next speaker is the perfect follow-up to what Ben was just talking about. So where we were talking quite a lot of quite a systemic level there. Gary Hipple is the Assistant Director of Children's Services for Wandsworth Council in London. And he will reflect on the meso level drivers of child morning hunger that they're seeing in Wandsworth and explain why these challenges have led them to invest in Magic Breakfast. Over to you, Gary.
Indeed. Thank you, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. Jackie said, I'm Gary Hipple, Assistant Director, Children's Services here in Wandsworth. And I'm talking about morning hunger in our local authority, what's driving it, root causes that we're seeing, and why it matters across education, health, and council services, and how our partnership with Magic Breakfast isn't just because they're lovely people to work with, but also for us a practical, evidence-based response. Next slide, please. So the start of this for us recently has very much been around the work of our Cost of Living Commission, looking at all factors affecting poverty in our area. And the Commission was very clear that food insecurity didn't sit neatly in any one service area at all. Just as Ben was talking about, it cuts across education, health, housing and employment. And for children, crucially, it affects them in ways that are often invisible, as lots of us will know, until they show up in their behaviour, their attendance and their learning. So next slide, please. This is a slide about illustrating some of the work of that commission, which brought together partners from all different sectors and areas of our council to then get to some recommendations. So next slide. So what the commission kind of was very strong about in its messaging was that schools are one of, if not the only universal service that children access every day. So it makes them uniquely powerful as places to intervene early and fairly. And that's not that schools should carry the burden alone. We're really clear on that, but because they're trusted places, they're consistent, and they're embedded in all our communities. And I'm sure all in the session are aware, for children, food insecurity shows up most sharply at the start of the day, doesn't it? If a child arrives at school hungry, everything that follows is just much harder. Concentration drops, emotional regulation is harder, and things that are relatively minor, small issues can escalate really quickly. And teachers and support staff in our schools are asked to manage the impact of that hunger before learning has even begun. So when we talk about breakfast here, we're really talking about early intervention, prevention, and making sure that our children are ready to learn. So breakfast provision, as we know, really matters, and it reaches children before hunger turns into crisis elsewhere in the system. So what did we do out of that recommendation? So next slide, please. One of the outcomes was the setting up of a school's food strategy, looking at how the Commission's work and their recommendations could be practically fed down into schools. Next slide. That strategy then committed us to improving in a number of ways, breaking that down into some of the obvious ones like food provision and food education, sustainability, but also most importantly, that first one, food inclusion, making sure that we knew the children that we were trying to target, that needed most of our support. And we've done an awful lot of work around auto enrollment for free school meals to make sure that we find more of those children. We found in the past couple of years 1,100 more children in our area eligible for free school meals by doing that auto enrollment that hadn't been identified before, and that's allowed us to intervene at a strategic level much more effectively. Next slide, please. So moving on to kind of morning hunger itself. As is in chiming with what Ben said, it's structural, it's not behavioural, it's not about parenting choices, it's not about families not caring, and it's not limited to a small number of households either. What we know and what schools tell us consistently is that families are really under pressure. And in London, deprivation isn't evenly distributed. We've got hidden hunger in schools and communities that aren't known as areas of high deprivation, but have significant numbers of children arriving at school hungry. In Wandsworth here, we've got areas of great wealth, but sitting alongside areas where 40 to 50% of children live in poverty after housing costs, even when parents are in work. We've got over 3,000 children in temporary accommodation, which Ben touched on, and housing costs alone can double child poverty rates compared with before housing cost measures. And because rent and temporary accommodation costs take up so much of a family's household income, food often becomes the most flexible budget item. And breakfast is often the first meal that gets reduced or skipped when money runs out at end of week or end of month. Next slide, please. So a defining feature of hunger in our area is, again, back to what Ben said, and we kind of fall in line with the stats, is that most of the children living in poverty in our area are in working households. Over 70% of children in poverty have at least one working parent, but often in a low-paid, insecure, or 0 hours roles. And so we've got a lot of families that work in hospitality, cleaning, care, and the gig economy. So that then leads to early starts for those families, long commutes and shift work, which means parents may leave home before breakfast. They're not around to help with that. Food preparation, if they do it, is often rushed and skipped. And some families will expect their child to eat at school, even if the breakfast provision in school isn't suitable for their child. And all of those things directly increase morning hunger, particularly we're finding in primary age children. Also, we're saying the short-term income interruptions are a major trigger for morning hunger. So delays in benefits and benefit deductions or sanctions are strongly associated with those families then seeking out food bank use, and even income shocks significantly increase household food insecurity, especially for lone parents. Lone parents are disproportionately represented in our free school meal eligible data. And obviously we know that there's been a lot of changes to universal credit recently, and a lot of our households who run housing benefit have been moving across to universal credit, and that has pushed some families locally into food shortages. Again, forcing families, if they've got to prioritize food, they'll probably prioritize the evening meal over breakfast for children. I mentioned temporary accommodation, those 3,000 children that are living in temporary accommodation in our area, hostels or overcrowded flats, and they often lack adequate kitchen facilities, even storage for food, and a routine that would allow for meal preparation. So again, it makes consistent morning meals difficult for children moving between placements or even schools if they're having to move around. And even those schools that have got traditional breakfast models, they don't always work. Many schools work incredibly hard to support families, including through breakfast clubs and wraparound support, which I'm sure lots of you are familiar with. But some models have unintended barriers. So any paid provision obviously excludes some families. Targeted provision can create stigma, and provision that arrives on children arriving early doesn't always reach the children who need it most. And we think about that connection into attendance and punctuality issues. So even where breakfast exists, hunger can still go unaddressed. And so that's where our design of our Magic Breakfast Partnership provision really, really matters to us. So next slide, please. So our response in terms of how Partnership with Magic Breakfast works is designed to tackle those root causes directly. Firstly, by universal access in our supported schools. We work with the schools in quite a deep way. Shout out to our fantastic engagement partner from Magic Breakfast, Lucy, working with our schools to see what type of provision in the classroom works best. So it's available to all that need it. No forms, no eligibility checks, no fuss really for parents. That removes stigma and ensures children who need breakfast most are not signaled out. But it also guarantees nutritious provision. So supplies, the food's consistent, things children will eat, and schools can deliver it easily every day. So hunger is addressed reliably in those schools, not just when families are able to manage that at home. And then third, flexibility in the partnership. So schools choose what works for their community, not us and not anyone else. They know the children, they know the families best. So working with them, they'll decide on whether it's a classroom breakfast for a soft start, grab and go at the gate, a more traditional breakfast club, or provision for latecomers. So we flex that model to whatever fits the school best. That flexibility is critical to us. It allows us to respond to real life, really, not what we ideally would want to see. So next slide, please. So targeting impact and accountability. While sort of access is universal within schools, the partnership itself is very targeted. So we're prioritizing schools where food insecurity is most likely to be a barrier to learning. This ensures that the resources are directed to where they make the greatest difference. And our evidence so far is pretty consistent. Schools report improvements in children's concentration, their focus, their behavior, and ultimately their readiness to learn. And these benefits are particularly strong for our disadvantaged group, our pupils experience socioeconomic disadvantage. So from a system perspective, this really matters. Reducing hunger early on reduces pressure on teachers, we hope, on pastoral teams, on health services, and on family support. And importantly, our partnerships and there's accountability between us. The funding agreement between us sets clear expectations around delivery, reporting, and monitoring, ensuring that the programme remains focused on, it has a hunger focus rather than drifting into anything like a childcare substitute. It also allows schools that may have other provision to work alongside it. So in schools we might have multiple types of breakfast provision, but we've proven and shown that they can work together. So next slide, please. And then Magic Breakfast isn't a standalone initiative for us. We started off talking about our wider strategies, and this is one part of that. But it is very much a practical expression of how we work across education, across health, and with our council services to tackle that inequality and equity early. So by addressing that morning hunger, again, just reiterating, we're supporting learning, we're hopefully protecting the well-being of our children, we're reducing pressure on our schools by working with them and not leaving it to them to do, and giving children the best start to their day. And our evidence so far is showing so far it's working. So if I finish with our last slide, our impact report, we're serving over 5,500 breakfasts a day and crucially reaching a really high number of our disadvantaged cohort in the programme. And one thing just to flag up there in the top corner, we are seeing an expansion of our holiday packs as well. So looking at not just in term time, but what we're doing out of term time as well in the holidays. And that's becoming ever crucial to us. And a current piece of work we're working on is how we might expand our use of holiday provision and partnership with Magic Breakfast as our one of the programs that we provide from the Household Support Fund is ending, which provided food vouchers in the holidays. That's ending. So we're looking at how our breakfast provision and holiday packs can fill that gap in upcoming holidays. And that is our story.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much. That was such a brilliant insight. We will return for questions at the end, but to keep us on time, I'm going to go to our next speakers now. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Emma Gardner and Donna Mackay, the Deputy Head Teacher and Head Teacher of St Martin's Primary in Glasgow. We've kindly asked them to join us today to share the root causes of child morning hunger within their own school community, offering an insight into the realities facing their pupils and families. So moving down to more of that micro level. So if we can share the screen for Donna and Emma to join us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to sunny Scotland, which is quite an unusual thing for us because we had 4 seasons in one day yesterday, even a bit of snow. As I've been introduced, I'm head teacher of St Martin's Primary in Glasgow, and Emma is one of the deputy heads. We have a very unusual context in that we have the largest complex needs provision in the city for primary children, and we have a mainstream primary alongside that. On to the second slide. Yes, next slide. Can we change the slides, please, and I'll talk through this. It's very small. So we have a mainstream primary of about 194 children. We have 79 children in our enhanced provision, which is children with complex needs who are transported all around the city to come to us. We have got 84% of our learners are in SIMD bands 1 to 4. So that's the social index of multiple deprivation, which is really considered amongst the poorest children in Scotland. And the reasons for that have just been captured in everything that everyone has said before us. It's around poverty of experience, poverty, financial poverty, fuel poverty, food poverty, poverty of language in terms of what they have in terms of vocabulary to access learning. We have got a very neurodiverse community where there is lots of hidden elements around these children's experiences due to the fact that we don't have that day-to-day daily contact with families because so many children are bussed into us. There are 160 children out of the almost 300 children who are bussed into us on a day and daily basis. I have a management team that consists of myself, 2 deputies and 3 principal teachers. We've got 29 teachers and 31 support for learning workers. We have got a really big team, including escorts and a child development officer. And so the big challenge for us is how do we incorporate meeting the children's needs in every aspect of their day and daily living. We have got children who are awaiting leave to remain. We have got families who are currently here illegally and who are going through the process to get their leave to remain. We have got a high percentage of, sorry, excuse me, my phone's going, a high percentage of refugees. We have got, do you know, it's an absolute melting pot of every level of need that you could possibly imagine. In terms of a variety of nationalities, we have 6% of white Scottish children, and the rest are predominantly Asian, African, Eastern European. So there's lots of issues that come in and around that. So the big challenge for us is how we meet their learning needs, how we meet their communication needs, how we safeguard our children, and how we can safely ensure that when they come into school that they are welcomed, that they feel safe, and that very, very basic level need of being fed is ensured on a day and daily basis. Despite all the kind of high level stats of deprivation, we kind of kick the trend when it comes to attendance. Our attendance hasn't dipped post-COVID. We're currently, I think, about 92% of the school attends every single day. Part of the reason that we think that happens is because parents know that the children get fed when they come to school. We have had a long-standing relationship with Magic Breakfast. I think this is us into our 8th year of that, and the fact that we are able to say that, you know, there has been no dip in attendance through all the various challenges that we've had, and we can strongly link it to children not being food poor, knowing that when they come in, they are part of a community who celebrates breakfast together in the morning. There is zero stigma attached to that. There is zero cost of the school day attached to that. And we say to parents, we would much rather that our children were in, even if it's late, than them not being in at all. Some of our children would be off because, you know, if the parents get them up in the morning, they have to feed them, or if they get them up in the morning, they have to feed them and put on, you know, like the gas or the electricity. And when you've got a very finite pot of money, if your children are sleeping, you don't have to have the heating on. So we've kind of removed that as being a daily battle and choice for some of our families.
Next slide, please. So you can see some of the factors that we have noticed and that are particular to our school. As Donna mentioned before, the SIMD, so the Scottish Multiple Index, the factors that tell us our children are in poverty are really high in our area. How this impacts is that children will come in hungry. How we deal with this is our management team are timetabled every single day, Monday to Friday. We will make the bagels, we will make the toast, and we take that out to the children in the mainstream, into the playground. And then we have that soft data on who's taking toast, who's taking bagels, who's coming back for more, who's presenting in a way that would give us concern. And we know that from first thing in the morning. We can look at trends, we can speak to social work first thing in the morning if there's anything that is concerning. As we have what was previously two schools come together as one, we have, as Donna said, 80 children with additional support needs. So that includes autism, ADHD, children with more complex needs on one side of the school. We tend to have a lot more children with neurodiversity in our mainstream as well. So there are a lot of issues around sleep with our children. They don't have good sleep patterns. So getting them up in the morning and getting them into school is very stressful from our parents. So knowing that when they do come in, that breakfast is waiting for them, that the children will get that breakfast, they'll also get that wee chat that we talked about as well, and that will come into school. So that really reduces that anxiety. It helps the parents to know, no, I'll send them, just like Donna said, even if it's late. That keeps our attendance high. Recently we have had to do attendance meetings with some of our parents. And one of the notable appointments that we had with parents was two parents actually, who recently got their asylum status. So they were immediately taken out their accommodation and put on the Glasgow housing list. When they went on the Glasgow housing list, because there's a housing crisis at the moment, they weren't able to be given a home, so they were put in temporary accommodation, which was like a bed and breakfast. So how do they access, food in the morning for their children at a cost that is accessible? One of our families was lucky enough to have a really close relationship with their local church, and the dad said to me he was basically living in the church, so they only go to sleep in the bed and breakfast, that actually the people in the church, and knowing that when the children come into school, they could have their breakfast in the school. These were all the things that were supporting the school, that were supporting the children. And that we know that the other family, their accommodation was really far away. They actually should have enrolled at another school, but because they knew that the support that we provide through external agencies such as Magic Breakfast, the parent didn't want to take their children out of our school. They wanted to continue. So she was leaving early in the morning, putting the children on the bus, coming with them and coming collecting them at the end of the day. So all of those factors we are getting from our parents, and we are really, Magic Breakfast is one of the contributors, one of the organisations who's really helping us to meet those individual needs that we are finding out when we speak to parents in our community. And I think that's the last picture is just a wee picture of us. The mainstream, we go out every morning into, so the photograph on the left there is one of our PTs there, making the bagels and the toast that we take out to the playground. And then for our ASN children who come in transport, each class is a wee individual basket there with the children's individual orders, and that's taken in again, made part of that daily routine in the class. So that's us all finished up. Thank you so much.
Lovely. No, thank you so much for your time and for providing such a great run through of all the different factors that you're facing with your school and how breakfast can help in so many different ways. That's so helpful. I'm going to move now to the Q&A. And I think we've heard quite a lot about the different things that operate at a macro, meso and micro levels. We've had a few questions come through. So I'm just going to first come to Gary and ask, there was a question around school kitchens that was sent a little earlier, Gary, which was around about issues with school kitchens, with getting access to school kitchens to provide more cooked food, more hot food. Is that an issue with any of your schools? Is that something you've come across at all?
Unfortunately, yes. So there's a challenge of, if schools, we do run as a council an aggregated school meals service. So we have a single provider. So but that means we are able to influence that, that use of kitchens. And it's about being practical, isn't it? Obviously, there are, so there are food hygiene issues around, separation of various, types of ingredients, etc. But because we've got a fairly wide contract, as I say, with a lot of schools, we're able to sort of mediate between kitchens and provider if needed. Though it's rarely needed that, actually, because the breakfast provisions often run from a different part of the school. Or hot provisions. So for example, I think about, say, baked beans might be on the breakfast menu, and they might be cooked in away from the kitchen wherever the school have set up the breakfast provision. So it can be an issue, but it's about sitting down and practically working out between different parties, and that's where we've got a role as an intermediary rather than maybe the schools having to engage and spend time negotiating that.
Thank you. Yes, and I know that Magic Breakfast has worked with different corporate partners as well to support on how hot food can be delivered that doesn't need the kitchen. So Heinz Beans kind of canteens that we have that heat themselves, other solutions with Quakers. So they have been really good as well. But yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it is something that we've also been talking to governments about in that bigger issue. Donna and Emma, can I come to you? There was a great question around the links between children's diagnosis of neurodivergent conditions and child morning hunger, and whether we understand the links between the two. So Emily kindly, who works in our impact and innovation team, has provided a link to some of the sort of links some of the connections we have from the stats side, the insight side, where we can and have linked neurodivergent children to child morning hunger. But I think you mentioned a few bits when you were talking around it could be transport that children are coming on that send transport. It could be lack of sleep in the morning. It could be difficulty getting them into school, needing a nurturing environment. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
So lots of our children who have differences, who are neurodivergent, have very complicated sleep patterns. So they find it difficult to get to sleep. They find it difficult to stay asleep, to really get that important part of the sleep, the deep part of the sleep. Lots of our children are actually have medication to help with that. And over time, what parents are reporting to us is that the children, it wears off. The longer the child is on, the medication doesn't have the same impact. So we have the children in our ASM part of our school are collected on a bus and a taxi, and it can only wait a couple of minutes for that child to come out the house and come on. So it can be very difficult for a parent who's a very tired and lethargic child who's been up during the night, and they will also have been, who's had a disrupted sleep pattern, to get them up, get them dressed and get them out at that particular window for the taxi or for the bus. So we know from our parents that that can be very stressful. So knowing that they are coming into the school, that they can access a bagel, they can access toast, or there's also cereal as well as provided in our ASM part of the school. So that is parents feel happier putting their children out in the morning, knowing that we can provide that, and we have that higher number of children. Because we have the ASM part of the school, we have a higher number of placing requests into our mainstream part of the school for children with neurodevelopmental differences, because they know that we are very inclusive and that we work with a range of partners who will provide that very nurturing and that understanding of neurodivergence, that it's not just about the children come in, I'm ready to learn, I'm here, teach me. There is so much work that needs to be done for many of our children before they're in that place ready to learn.
There's also things around that some of our children, because they can be on the bus for up to an hour, they get travel sick. And so they won't eat in the morning before they come on to the bus because it makes them unwell. And that's got nothing to do with neurodiversity. That's just how they're intolerant they are of being on transport for a period of time. But in addition to that, I think what you have to understand is about the trauma of the autistic child, and their transitions have to be at the speed that they make their transitions. They can't always be when we need to make them. I think sometimes we get very anxious because we've got a structure and a routine to fulfill, and they might not be ready to make those small transitions along with that. And so that causes really a significant increase in their cortisol levels. And we know that cortisol impacts in your tummy, it impacts in interoception, it reduces that feeling of hunger, it leads to a decrease in appetite. So what you really want to do is have the children transition into an environment where they're as settled and calm as they possibly can be, and then you're able to access eating. And so we've got a very flexible approach to breakfast. Breakfast is available till 10:30 in the morning, and it's there as and when the children are ready to access it. It's also there for our latecomers. It's there almost, like in a kind of canteen style for our children who need a soft start because of their neurodiversity, so they're not ready for the social demands and cognitive overloads of going straight into a class setting. And there's also another really, really simple thing, is that children in our school are so routined that they will not eat breakfast until it's a magic breakfast bagel, because they like them in school and that is part of the routine, and the parents have bought the same bagels to give them at home at the weekend, and they won't eat them because there's a food association to environment. So the complexity around neurodiversity and food in every aspect of these children's experience is massive. But I suppose for us, you have to be as child-led as possible and understand the links to their anxiety levels, to their sleep deprivation, to their physical feeling of sick, to the cortisol levels, to them being very structured and routine, and to them just liking a bagel in the morning. It could be as simple as that.
Absolutely. And you know what? There is a section in the root causes report that speaks exactly to that, needing to be child-centered, needing to be child-led, needing to understand what that looks like, and being able to, as far as possible, tailor provision to that. There is a great question that I wanted to put to Gary and Donna and Emma, actually, around the government commitment and the start of the rollout of the free breakfast club programme. So this is for primary schools only at this point. This isn't for nurseries or secondary, but in terms of that rollout of free breakfast clubs, how do you envisage that changing anything that you're doing with your current programmes? Gary, should we come to you first on that one?
Yeah, what a tricky question this is for us at a kind of local authority level, because, as I say, a programme is established and working well. We've, there was an expectation when we set it up, or part of the way during it, that particularly from politicians that supported it to start with, that while we knew there was a national breakfast program coming, that at some point schools would transition to it. Now, none of our schools are currently on the national breakfast program, and I can envisage one of the challenges we have will be convincing schools, maybe not convincing them, but them making a decision to move to, or to want to move to it, because what they like is the flexibility, which we talked about in our program, which may not be as readily available within the national program, and also the requirement to offer, while it sounds good, some wraparound support connected to that, sessions just sort of before for childcare, or just to it is effectively childcare, but supporting school. Some schools will have a challenge with just practically staffing that. We know that we've got all schools would love to make the offer, but some schools just practically haven't got the members of staff, and in tight funding situations that schools are in, that we're often relying either on goodwill of staff to help with the current delivery, or some schools are able to pay an hour to facilitate that in the morning. So that's a challenge for them. And so the answer is it probably will change. I suspect some schools may move to the national programme, but I also suspect we'll have lots of schools that will be campaigning to maintain the local provision.
Interesting. Conscious of time, but Donna and Emma, I'd love to hear your answer on this one as well before we wrap up.
So obviously the Scottish Government is very committed to free breakfasts for every child in Scotland. It's part of the reason that they were elected, and I know that there's been pressure, particularly because there's another election coming up, so I need to be very careful, but that is obviously something that they are keen to make sure happens. There has been a consultation with our union for head teachers and senior managers to see what the impact of this initiative would be in terms of workload. And see, to be honest, for our school, there won't be an impact because we've been doing it for the last 7 to 8 years. I think, Gary's entirely right. It does. The way that we run it is because we're totally committed to it. We, as a management team, have agreed that we would have that workload, that we would make that provision, and what we gain in terms of soft intelligence and building up those safe relationships with children is far outweighs the half an hour each morning that we take in turn. So I think there's lots of things. It's quite a loaded question. I think it's not a straight answer, because, if it has to be implemented, it will be implemented, but it's how effectively that will be and how individual schools are able to meet those staffing requirements to make sure that the children get, because Glasgow has a breakfast provision that is, available from 8 until 8:45. So I don't know whether it would be done, through the kind of arm's length company or organisation that are linked to Glasgow City Council. I don't know how that would be, but just from our point of view, then we would just welcome it because it will not make much difference.
Yes, and as you say, you've got different commitments between England and what will happen for English schools and what will happen for Scottish schools, and the commitments of the current Scottish government and what that looks like. So it's interesting, and hopefully two governments can learn from each other, but they will potentially be done in slightly different ways. I'm afraid that's all we have time for in terms of, and thank you so much for all the questions that have gone in there. I just wanted to thank our fantastic speakers for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for the time that you've given to join us as well. We will be sending out an email with the recording and also with the full report, which we would very much encourage you to read. And there are some aspects of things that have been asked in the questions that are picked up in the report. So that's worth looking at as well. The report is also on our website. Our next Magic Morning will be in the summer, so have a look out for the details of that one. And in the meantime, thank you for joining us, and goodbye, everybody.